Imagine standing in a vast, desolate valley, nothing but dry, dusty bones as far as the eye can see. The silence is suffocating, heavy. A faint breeze stirs the air, and then a sound. Out of nowhere, the bones begin to move. You watch in awe as ribs reconnect, muscles form over them and skin stretches tight. In mere moments, an entire army stands assembled, breathing, alive. You might think this is a scene from a horror movie or a science fiction blockbuster, but what if I told you this vision is real? It's not from Hollywood, it's straight out of the Bible, a vision with extraordinary power and a profound message. And here's the truly remarkable part. This ancient vision speaks directly to your life today. You may be wondering, how does an image of dry bones have anything to do with me? But trust me, by the time we finish, you'll see how this message could transform everything you thought was impossible in your life. Let's rewind thousands of years to meet Ezekiel, the man at the heart of this story. He wasn't just an ordinary man, he was a prophet. But even prophets find themselves in desperate situations. Ezekiel's situation was grim. Imagine being far from home, not by choice, but because your entire nation has been conquered and you've been exiled. That's exactly what happened to Ezekiel and the people of Israel. They were living in Babylon, taken captive after their land, the promised land, had been overrun. The temple they cherished, the very heart of their worship and identity, was destroyed. Their homes? Gone. Their families? Scattered. It was as if everything they knew had been wiped away. It's hard to imagine a more hopeless scenario. Their dreams, their faith, their identity, it all seemed shattered beyond repair. Many of them likely thought, God has abandoned us. There's no future for us. It's over. Can you relate to that? Maybe you've had moments where you felt like life had beaten you down so hard that you weren't sure if you could ever get back up. Maybe you've looked at your situation and thought, there's no way out of this. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In the middle of that overwhelming despair, God decides to act. He chooses Ezekiel to deliver a message. But this wouldn't be an ordinary message. No, this would be something unforgettable, something so powerful, so visually striking that no one who heard it would ever forget. One day, as Ezekiel is going about his life, not expecting anything extraordinary, something happens. The hand of the Lord comes upon him, and in an instant he's taken by the Spirit to a place that feels more like a nightmare than a vision. He finds himself standing in the middle of a vast valley, stretching as far as the eye can see. But it's not a lush valley filled with trees and life, it's a valley filled with death. Everywhere Ezekiel looks, he sees bones. Not just a few scattered here and there, but thousands, maybe millions, of dry, bleached bones lying on the ground, as if some great tragedy or battle had left its mark long ago. Have you ever had a moment where you felt completely overwhelmed by your circumstances, like you were standing in the middle of your own valley of dry bones? Maybe it's a broken relationship, a lost job, a dream that feels dead. You're surrounded by what seems like the remains of what could have been, and you don't see any hope. That's the kind of despair Ezekiel must have felt as he stood in that valley. But what Ezekiel didn't know was that he was about to witness one of the greatest miracles ever recorded in the Bible. While Ezekiel is standing there, stunned by the sight, God asks him a question that shakes him to his core. He says, "Son of man, can these bones live?" Think about that for a moment. Imagine standing in the middle of a valley of dry bones where death and desolation seem final, and God asks you, "Can these bones live?" At first glance, the answer seems obvious. No. Bones can't just come back to life. Once life is gone, it's gone, right? That's what our human logic tells us. But Ezekiel doesn't respond with logic. He responds with faith. Instead of saying, "No, that's impossible," he says something remarkable. "Oh Lord God, you know." In other words, Ezekiel recognizes that while he doesn't have the power to bring these bones to life, God does. Ezekiel knows that God's power transcends the natural, that with God, the impossible becomes possible. And this, right here, is where the story becomes deeply personal. How often do we face situations in our lives where we've already decided it's over? We look at a failed relationship, a lost dream, an illness or financial crisis, and we say, "There's no way out of this. It's dead." But what if, in that very moment, God is standing beside you, asking, "Can this live again?" What if God is challenging you to look beyond what seems possible and believe in something greater? It's a question that stretches our faith. It forces us to confront our limitations and recognize that, while we may be powerless, God is not. And if we, like Ezekiel, can respond with, "Lord, only you know," we open ourselves up to the possibility of a miracle. We shift from focusing on what we can't do to trusting in what God can do. Here's where the story takes an even more incredible turn. God tells Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones. He says, "Prophesy to these bones and say to them, 'O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord.'" Can you imagine the scene? Ezekiel, standing alone in this desolate valley, surrounded by piles of bones, is told to speak to them, to declare life to something that's long been dead. If anyone had been watching, they might have thought he'd lost his mind. Talk to bones, how ridiculous. But Ezekiel doesn't hesitate. He doesn't question God. He obeys. And this is such a powerful lesson for us. Sometimes God asks us to do things that, from the outside, seem absurd. Maybe He's asking you to keep believing in a relationship everyone else has given up on, or to trust for healing when the doctors have said there's no hope. It can feel crazy to believe when everything around you screams impossible. But it's in these moments, when we choose obedience, even when we don't understand, that miracles happen. Ezekiel speaks the words God gave him. "O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord." And what happens next is extraordinary. Suddenly, there's a noise, a rattling sound. The bones start to move. They come together, bone to bone, forming skeletons. Then tendons and muscles appear, covering the bones, and finally, skin forms over them. But even after all of this, something crucial is still missing. There's no breath in them. So God tells Ezekiel to prophesy again, this time to the breath. He says, "Prophesy to the breath, son of man, and say to the breath, 'Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may live.'" Ezekiel speaks, and the breath enters the bodies. In an instant, they come to life, breathing, standing, moving. Where there was once only death and desolation, there is now life. An entire army rises from the dust. This vision is so much more than a miraculous event from ancient history. It's a profound symbol of what God can do in our lives today. You see, the Valley of Dry Bones wasn't just about literal bones. It was a representation of the spiritual and emotional state of the people of Israel. They felt dead inside, cut off from hope, abandoned and forgotten. But God was showing them that even in their darkest moment, He could bring life. He could restore what seemed lost forever. And here's the incredible part. This isn't just a story about Israel. It's a message for you and me. How many times do we feel like we're standing in a valley of dry bones? We look around at our lives and see only brokenness, disappointment, and failure. But God is saying, "I can bring life here. I can restore what seems lost." Think about those areas in your life that feel dead. Maybe it's a relationship that feels beyond repair, a dream you've given up on, or a part of yourself that feels like it's withered away. What if God is asking you to prophesy over those dry bones, to speak words of life into the very places where hope seems impossible? It's easy to feel discouraged when we don't see immediate change, but Ezekiel's vision shows us that restoration is often a process. First, the bones come together, then the tendons and muscles, and finally the breath of life. God works in stages, and sometimes we need to be patient as He brings things back to life, piece by piece. But here's the key. The transformation only happens when we speak God's word over our situation. Ezekiel didn't just stand there waiting for the bones to move on their own. He spoke. He declared God's promises over those lifeless bones, and that's when the miracle began. So, what would it look like for you to start speaking life into your situation? What if you began to declare God's promises over your relationships, your health, your finances, your future? What if you chose to believe that God can bring life where there seems to be only death? Now, here's something even more profound. After the bones come to life, God explains the meaning of the vision to Ezekiel. He says, "These bones are the whole house of Israel." They say, "Our bones are dried up and our hope is gone, we are cut off." In other words, the people had lost all hope. They felt abandoned and forgotten, but God wasn't finished with them. He goes on to say, "I will put my spirit in you and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it." God was promising his people a complete restoration, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. He was saying, "I see your despair, but I'm not done with you. I'm going to bring you out of this valley, and I'm going to breathe new life into you." That same promise applies to us today. God sees the valleys we're in, the places where we feel dried up and hopeless, and he's saying, "I'm not finished with you. I'm going to bring you out of this, and I'm going to fill you with my spirit so you can live again." This story isn't just about survival, it's about revival. It's about God taking what's dead and making it alive again. It's about hope being restored, dreams being revived, and lives being transformed. And this is where we get to the heart of the matter. The ultimate purpose of this vision, the bones coming together, the breath entering them, the army rising, is so that we would know who God is. He says, "Then you will know that I am the Lord." When God brings us through impossible situations, when he restores what we thought was lost, it's not just about fixing our problems. It's about revealing his power, his faithfulness, his love. Think about the impact that could have, not just in your life, but in the lives of those around you. When people see what God has done in you, how he brought life to the dead places, how he restored what seemed beyond repair, they'll recognize his power too. Your story becomes a testimony, a living witness to the God who brings life to dry bones. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this question. What are the dry bones in your life? Where do you need to speak life? Where do you need to believe that God can do the impossible? If you're ready to see the impossible become reality, if you're ready to see the dry bones in your life come to life again, then it's time to start prophesying over your situation. It's time to declare God's promises, to believe that he can and will bring restoration. Remember, the God who brought an entire army to life in a valley of dry bones is the same God who can bring new life to your circumstances today. He's asking, can this live? What will your answer be? If this message has inspired you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you don't miss more powerful stories like this. God bless you.